All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And on this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast, I am talking about the upcoming Major League Baseball season. And with that said, all things in the National League East. Now, the NL East last year was won by the Philadelphia Phillies, but we saw three teams get to the playoffs from this division. We saw the Mets get hot over the second half of the season. They got a run all the way to the NLCS. The Braves were able to survive all of those injuries, and they were still participants in the postseason. I think this is once again going to be a very tightly contested division here in 2025. Now, I talked about those injuries with the Braves, and they were able to navigate their way through all of that, get to the postseason. But of course, the wild card round would see their undoing as they lost to the San Diego Padres. But with the start of a new season here, will the Braves be able to once again be healthy in order to win the National League East for the seventh time in the last 8 years? Having a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. in the outfield is going to be big for Atlanta. We saw him tear that right ACL in 2021, and last year it was in the left knee. They're going to get him back at some point, but the question is going to be how effective will Acuna be after his second major knee surgery in the last 4 years? Now, Acuna's presence in the lineup changes a lot of things for the Braves, and I say this because we saw Matt Olson last year. He was solid, but he wasn't 2023 solid. And again, we saw Olson and Acuna competing for that NL MVP together in 2023. And of course, not having Acuna there for a full season really changed things for this Braves offense. Austin Riley, slid back as far as his productivity in 2024. Can he get it back to where it was a couple of years ago? Now, Marcelo Zuna, all this guy does is hit home runs because in the last 3 years with Atlanta, he's hit 102 of them. And he's going to have a big time impact once again for the Braves, getting Ozzy Albies healthy. Okay. This is a theme right here for the Braves. Nonetheless, that's going to be big for this lineup. And then you look at this pitching staff, they had the top ERA in the National League a year ago. Okay. Now, losing Max Fried was big, and I expected Fried to leave because I did not see the Braves giving Max Fried the type of money that he just got from the New York Yankees. Okay. But Chris Sale, we saw the old Chris Sale last year for the Braves. He went 18-3 with a 2.38 ERA en route to winning the National League Cy Young Award. Nobody saw that coming. We all know what Chris Sale can be as a pitcher, but it's just a matter of him staying healthy. Also, speaking of healthy, getting Spencer Strider back from Tommy John. That's going to be big for this pitching staff as well. Of course, with that said, the Braves are still going to approach him with the kid gloves, but nonetheless, Brian Snicker, excuse me, he's been a longtime manager in Atlanta. He once again has a talented squad, but for me, the biggest thing with this Braves team is can they stay injury free? Okay. But then, moving on in this division, you look at the New York Mets, and of course, the Mets got off to a very slow start last season. And then from May on, or June on rather, nobody was playing them better baseball in the regular season, at least, than the Mets. We saw them get hot coming down the stretch. We saw how they clinched to get into the postseason with that epic doubleheader with the Braves, coming from behind with their backs against the wall to get out of the divisional round with the Milwaukee Brewers. They got past the Philadelphia Phillies in the LDS. And of course, that's one of those where when you think about the Phillies and Braves, there's no love lost. So, of course, the first time that these two clubs, these bitter rivals, met in the postseason, you knew it was big. And of course, the Mets got past them. But of course, they, like everybody else, could not overcome the Los Angeles Dodgers last year. However, the Mets want to build off of that. Why? Because, especially in New York City, last year's last year. And the folks who follow the Mets, just like any other professional sports club in that area, it's all about what have you done for me lately. Now, Mets team owner Steve Cohen is not one to shy away from spending money. He's been doing it a lot, okay? And he spent big this offseason, especially on one player. Steve Cohen had his eyes and sights set on outfielder Juan Soto, and he said he would not be outbid for Soto's services. And of course, it took $765 million of Cohen's money for the next 15 years to pry the prized outfielder away from the crosstown New York Yankees. And the Mets, of course, feel like they have their guy. So this is going to be Soto's fourth different team in the last 4 years. Of course, all of that was due to trades and contract issues. But nonetheless, he's going to be wearing the blue and orange for quite some time now. And you look at Soto and what he gives to this Mets lineup. He gives them a bona fide star. He gives them somebody in the middle of their lineup who opposing pitching staffs always have to account for. And he's a guy that he can put a lineup on his back for quite some time. And of course, he's a proven power hitter. I look at this Mets lineup, and when you think about the Mets franchise historically, you think about their pitching. But right now, I'm looking at this lineup, and this lineup has the potential to do some good things. I just talked about Juan Soto. You look at Francisco Lindor, who is in the prime of his career, excuse me, and he finished second to Shohei in the NL MVP balloting last year. Also, third baseman Mark Vientos showed last year what could happen if he finally got some ABs. Okay, and this kid showed that he's not just another guy, because even in the postseason run that the Mets had, Vientos came up big. He had some big hits against the Phillies, big hits against the Los Angeles Dodgers in that series, and I think he's ready. All right. We know about the contentious contract signing over the offseason between the Mets and Pete Alonso. But nonetheless, in my opinion, I truly do believe that that could be water under the bridge right now. And I think everybody's going to go forward. Pete Alonso, I think at the end of the day, he wanted to be back with the Mets. He just wanted to be compensated in a certain way. They got the deal done. And of course, if you're Pete Alonso, you are on the threshold of a record as you're 27 home runs shy of becoming the Mets all-time leader in that category. And that goes back to when Darryl Strawberry last played for the Mets back in 1990. Now, Jeff McNeil at second base. Will he be able to stay healthy? And on top of that, will he get back to being the guy that we saw, in 2022 for the Mets? That's going to be big because, Cohen went out and paid him, but nonetheless, you have youngsters in this organization like Luis Angel Acuna who are chomping at the bit for their opportunity. And if McNeil's not ready to go, and McNeil's not ready to bring his A game, they got some youngsters there that are more than willing to go out there and make it happen. Now, pitching wise, the Mets were seventh in the senior circuit last year in team ERA. And you just have to wonder, what do they have in store this year? Now, of course, they lost Luis Severino in free agency to the A's. Mets weren't going to pay him $20 million a year. I understand that. But Mets president of baseball operations, David Stearns, and this dates back to his time with the Milwaukee Brewers. He has never been one to go out there and overspend for starting pitching. He's always trying to find ways to piece it together with guys here and there. They brought in Sean Manaea a couple of years ago. And of course, he stepped up for the Mets last year. They re-signed him, and they're hopeful that with him changing his arm angle, that he's ready to turn the corner. We've got to wait and see. What about David Peterson? Is it going to be up or down? We got to wait and see with him. We saw the Mets sign Frankie Montas. He's out with an injury right now. But I said it at the time, and I'm going to stand by this. Just like I talked about with the Dodgers with Michael Conforto. And I really think Michael Conforto is going to do some big things for Los Angeles this year. I think that Clay Holmes could be a sleeper in this Mets rotation. He's already getting the ball for opening day next week. All right, but I think Clay Holmes has the potential to go out there and shock some people. Another big question mark for the Mets pitching. Can Kodai Senga stay healthy? He only made one start for New York last year. And I think that is going to be very big if he can go out there and stay healthy. Bullpen wise, I think the Mets have the potential to be solid. I think they're going to be a work in progress, but I do believe as the season goes on, they will get better. One big thing for the Mets, Edwin Diaz. He had his ups and downs in 2024. Now, it was his first season back after that leg injury in the 2023 World Baseball Classic. So if you're a Met fan, you're optimistic that now that he has his sea legs under him, so to speak, that he can get back to the form that made him one of the top closers in baseball. Carlos Mendoza, in 1 year as the Mets manager, showed that he has the perfect temperament for New York City and also for this Mets team. Let's see if that carries over to 2025 as the Mets want to win this division and do some bigger and better things, of course, in October. Now, I think this has the potential to be one of the better, if not the best or most competitive division in baseball this year. And you have to throw the Philadelphia Phillies into that mix because this team won 95 games last year and they won the NL East crown. And of course, unfortunately for the Phillies, that regular season success didn't translate to postseason success as they were one and done in October, courtesy of the New York Mets. Now, like I said, the National League East is going to be very, very top heavy this year. It's going to be very contentious. So you ask yourself, where do the Phillies fit into things? Well, I'll tell you like this: Philadelphia is going to be right there. Why? Because Bryce Harper continues to rake at the plate. They've got plenty of depth in this lineup with the likes of Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, and Trea Turner. Okay. And they were third in runs last year, and they were fourth in batting average and on base percentage. The Phillies can hit, make no mistake about it. The 1-2 punch that they have at the top of the rotation with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. And of course, Wheeler is coming off of his second 200 inning season of his career. So let's see how that translates to 2025. My biggest question for the Phillies is going to be their bullpen, and will it be a closer by committee? But nonetheless, Rob Thompson is going to once again have a team that's going to be right in the mix to get to the playoffs. You also have the Washington Nationals, who, after 5 consecutive losing seasons, you have to wonder, are they ready to turn the corner for and contend for a postseason berth? We got to wait and see. But if that's going to happen, the Nationals offense has to improve as they were last in the National League in home runs and 14th in runs scored a year ago. That's not going to cut it, okay? You got the well-traveled Josh Bell, who has played for the Nationals in 2021 and 2022. He's back. He brings a lot of power to the plate, especially from both sides. So let's see what he can do in this lineup. Jake Irvin, will he be able to continue to improve as a starting pitcher? He went 10 and 14 last year, ERA of 4.41 in 33 starts. Let's see if he can get that productivity up and, of course, that ERA down. You've got Mackenzie Gore in that rotation as well. Of course, he was part of the Juan Soto trade with San Diego. And this Washington team, they're young, they're feisty, and they're going to be exciting this year. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough for them to get to the playoffs, though. And finally, you've got the Miami Marlins. And of course, when you think about the Marlins, you think about a team that they're just there. Okay, that's the best way to sum it up. And with that said, will the woes continue for this Marlins team? They went from being a playoff team in 2023 to losing 100 games last year for the third time in franchise history. And a lot of that was because of their president of baseball operations, Pete Bendix. He simply just blew it up. You know, he's a sabermetric and analytics freak. But at the end of the day, you just have to ask yourself, does he really know what he's doing? Uh, you look at this team and Sandy Alcantara, you know, his return to this pitching staff after missing the entire 2024 season due to Tommy John. How is he going to bounce back? That's going to be a big thing right there. Cal Wonder God, my brother, peace to you, man. How's everything going out there? I hope everything is well with you and yours, man. Thanks for the love as always, man. You think about these Marlins, Only the Colorado Rockies had a worse team ERA than Miami last season, and none of these pitchers on this pitching staff made at least 25 starts. Only 29 quality starts from the Marlins last year. And of course, when you think about it, dead last in the National League. It ain't gonna cut it, man. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those where their pitching has to improve for them to somewhat have a chance in this division with so many deep lineups. And I think they are fighting an uphill battle. You have a no frills lineup for the Marlins, which is straight out of the movie Major League. And at the end of the day, you ask yourself, who are these guys? Okay, that's basically the way it is. Marlins Park is going to once again be empty unless the Marlins are facing the Braves or Yankees or Mets or somebody like that, and they bring fans with them. Miami was last in the National League in runs scored and on base percentage, and for first year manager Clayton McCullough, he's got his work cut out for him. That's all I'm gonna say, man. But at the end of the day, I think the Marlins flirt with losing 100 games once again. It's not just the fact that they don't have the talent. It's also what they are up against in this division. And luckily for them, in the current format in baseball, you only play your division opponents 13 times apiece, as opposed to 19 times in the old days. But nonetheless, the Marlins are not a good baseball team. I think when it's all said and done, the Phillies, Braves, and Mets are all going to battle for that top spot. I think the Nationals will be competitive. I think the Nationals will be fun to watch. I think the Nationals will show signs of improvement, but it's just the fact that the Mets, Phillies, and Braves are the big boys of this division. And the Braves have run this. They've been the kings of the frat house for quite some time. And I know the Phillies overtook them last year, partially because of what the Phillies can do, and also partially because of the injuries that the Braves had to deal with. And I really want to see if Atlanta can get healthy this year. That's going to be a big thing for them. I look at Philadelphia, that 1-2 punch, um, at the top of their rotation was Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, arguably the best in the National League. Okay. And then with the Mets, of course, their questions are going to be the pitching, but I think the Mets are going to hit because I think with Soto's not going to be a guy that's going to fade in the spotlight, if you will, of the Big Apple because he got that big deal. Remember last year, I know he was looking to get a big deal, but we saw what he did for the New York Yankees. He provided a lot of protection for Aaron Judge in that lineup. He delivered big time. Of course, Judge did not have a good postseason run for the New York Yankees. A lot of what they did was off of the bats of Juan Soto and Giancarlo Stanton. But nonetheless, I think Juan Soto is the real deal. We saw him on the World Series stage twice now. First with the Washington Nationals back in 2019, and of course last year with the Yankees. But you've got Francisco Lindor, who has really become entrenched with the Mets. I think Mark Vientos can do some big things, and I like Pete Alonso because Pete is going to be a guy where he's gone from having to be the guy in the middle of the lineup for the Mets to now just being one of the guys. And I think at the end of the day, he got that 3-year deal. He has the opt outs. He still wants to go out there and get some more money. So I think incentive wise, there's stuff for him to go out there and play for. Nonetheless, I think this is going to be a Pier 6 brawl, to quote the late great Gorilla Monsoon. When you talk about what's going to happen this year in this division between the Braves, between the Mets, and between the Philadelphia Phillies. I think all three have the potential to go out there and win this division. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give the slightest of slight nods to the team in Queens. I'm talking about the New York Mets. I think the Mets win this division by the skin of their teeth. I think the Phillies and Braves are right there. It really would not surprise me to see this division title be up in the air heading into the final weekend of the season. That's how close things are. Remember, the Braves and Mets finished with the same record last year. Okay, it could possibly happen again. They're going to beat up on each other. I think the important thing is when you have teams so close and they have the potential to all be right there. I think it's going to come down to you taking care of your business against the teams that you're supposed to take care of your business against, and that's going to be key for these division foes. I think if you're the Mets, you definitely want to try to go out there and get off to a faster start than you did last season. But at the same time, the slow start last year wasn't a complete detriment. But with that said, you don't want to keep doing that every year and think, hey, we could just turn it on when we have to. No, if you've got the ability to go out there and take care of your business, do it. And I think early on, the lineup of the Mets is going to have to carry them as they try to feel things out with their pitching. You look at the Braves, Phillies, and Mets. None of these teams are fully complete right now. I think the biggest thing with me with the Braves, and I cannot harp on this enough, they've got to get healthy. And I want to see them if they are healthy. Okay, the Phillies, I just have questions about their bullpen. The Mets, I have questions about their starting pitching. Somebody's got to win this division at the end of the day. Like I said, it's tightly contested, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to give the slightest of slight edges until in this race to the Metropolitans. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into this 300 pounds of sports knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Now, if you like what you saw and heard on this podcast, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. I cannot begin to tell you how much appreciated that it is. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check out the sports discussion group at the Sports Depot 365, one of the better sports debating platforms going on social media. And as I continue to rattle this off, as far as the upcoming MLB season, we've covered the NL East, we've covered the AL East, we've covered the American League East, and pardon me, the National League West. Okay, up to this point, so three divisions down, three more to go. Please definitely check out this channel tomorrow as I will be talking all things about the American League Central. But once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. Cal One, as always, thank you for chiming in, my brother. Definitely appreciate the support. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.